Hello, everyone. I'm here with another interview today. This is Cynthia Hammer from FINDtheADHDgirls.org. Today, we're interviewing Ashley Schwenn. Ashley, why don't you tell us how you help parents who have children with ADHD?
The most effective way dealing with other parents who have kids with ADHD is just sharing that I'm also a parent of a child with ADHD. I understand the unique struggles. I understand ADHD from a professional and knowledgeable standpoint and from a practical standpoint, the ways that it plays out at home. I'm able to bring my unique perspective on ADHD to build some functional strategies for coping with your child's ADHD. I've been working with students and families in schools for the last 16 years.
You talk like you have some personal experience with ADHD.
I am a parent of a child with ADHD. Our older daughter was diagnosed shortly after her 9th birthday and started medication. We've seen a world of difference in her confidence and ability to thrive in the school setting. It's not easy when the meds wear off. There's a lot of extra support we provide her at home and some mindful moments and breaths that we need to take as parents when we've asked her for the 4th time to do anything.
What alerted you that she might have ADHD?
I was working with her doing her homework during COVID, and she was reading, but she wasn't comprehending. I would get her started at 8 a.m. and check back in with her 3 hours later. She had done nothing, but our younger daughter had started and finished her work in an hour. That was a really big clue that there was something different.
That's how a lot of women figured it out for themselves, but also for their children. During COVID, there wasn't that structure. Your specialty is helping parents with IEPs. So let's get into that. What kind of tips do you have for parents when they want to prepare them for the IEP so they'll feel confident when they walk into the room?
To prepare best for your child's IEP meeting, you should have reviewed any kind of testing or evaluation that was done to identify their ADHD, and also that might have given suggestions as to the types of classroom accommodations that could be helpful for them, and also ways that they learn based on their neurocognitive profile. You should also have been in communication with your child's teacher to fully understand all of their challenges in the classroom, and also bring your knowledge, jot down your experiences of what's going on at night with homework. That can really give some tips as to things that could be better adjusted in the school setting based on the skills that your child's struggling with at home after hours.
Or do you think a parent should go as soon as they think it's ADHD or only after they've talked with their pediatrician? How sure should the parent be feeling before they approach the school that they want to pursue an IEP?
Typically, before asking for an IEP or before a child would be considered to be tested, school districts implement some interventions or lower level accommodation plans, such as a 504 accommodation plan. Maybe your child has a 504 accommodation plan, but it's not working well. They're still struggling. Sometimes you just know. You've got that gut feeling there's something wrong, that's not right, that you've exhausted all of your resources. That's a great time to ask for an IEP.
I've heard that when you think your child has ADHD, you shouldn't even wait for them to try different things, that you should right away push for the IEP.
You never want to wait too long. And schools are legally obligated to provide services for students basically at the lowest level possible. So within their least restrictive environment. Schools aren't legally mandated to give the Cadillac of services, and that's just a reality. But when you know your child is struggling and they just are floundering, and maybe even you're seeing high levels of irritability and frustration and school refusal and missed assignments are piling up, that's really when you should be pushing harder for that IEP, because it's clear that whatever they're doing isn't working.
Yeah, so I guess it's noticing the degree of the challenge, and if it's a lot of challenge, thinking that a 504 won't be enough.
Absolutely. And it's making the distinction Does my child just need a few tweaks in the educational environment, like sitting up front or having assignments broken down into smaller pieces or taking a test in a smaller group or quiet setting or extra time? If those are enough, great, then that's what they need. But if your child's really struggling to tackle large assignments, to get started, to finish tasks, to pay attention consistently during class, and they're throwing a lot of fits at home with homework, that's really a time that we come to recognize that our child likely has some significant executive function skills that need to be taught by school personnel. And that's the difference between a 504 and an IEP. We can tweak the environment with a 504, but when our kid is showing that they have executive skills that need to be remediated and taught, and need personnel support, that's when we recommend that IEP.
Okay, so once the parent has the child's IEP, how can the parent evaluate it to know if it's a good plan?
Sure, the first step is to read the evaluation and see if you feel like that evaluator or psychologist appropriately assessed your child. Did they test IQ? Did they test achievement? Did they test attention? Did they observe your child in structured and unstructured settings? Did they get information? Was the evaluation comprehensive? Does it sound like your child? Does it match what you're seeing? If not, there's a problem. You might have a child who masks at school. We have one of those children, and we've had a school evaluation where they've said there's no problems. And as the mom and father, we know there were lots of problems. So that required more advocacy. That's a great question. One thing to take into consideration that often helps a child to mask is if they're taking medication, because the medication essentially is masking many of their ADHD symptoms. And in that structured setting, they are able to often show higher levels of executive function skills and ability to control their behaviors and their emotions. In terms of masking, when you're looking at that evaluation, you can see your parent rating scales will likely be in the at-risk to clinically significant range for a number of executive skills, maybe hyperactivity, impulsivity, attention problems. And in school, often if your child's masking, you'll see those ratings be flatlined, or they'll say, I observed your child and they were on task 100% of the time. And my child told me I knew I was being watched, so I was extra good. But if your child has the skills to do well, they will do well. So when they're at home and they have completely fallen apart, and the homework is not getting done and they're avoiding it, it usually isn't a behavior or an opposition or an obstinance. It's usually because they lack the skill to know how to get started. They lack the skill to know how to break that larger project down into smaller steps. And then they lack the skill, in addition to the planning and organization, to actually follow through on that multi-step process.
So I'm just wondering if the child's doing well in school and the school doesn't observe the problem, is that all they care about?
Typically, schools prioritize the needs that they see while the student is there. What you should be paying attention to is what you're doing as a parent, the level of support that you're providing your child outside of school so that they can perform in school. For example, our daughter, we had her in weekly counseling for executive function skills. We were keeping up with the pediatrician. We were using executive function strategies and homework follow up. We were also having monthly psychiatry appointments to adjust her medications. In the sixth grade, we had to adjust those 3 or 4 different times. All these things we were doing and exhausting ourselves for why she was doing so well at school. In the meeting, it was shared that the school identified that they could be doing more to be helpful. That was the tipping point that allowed her to access that IEP. What you were talking about before, knowing if the IEP is appropriate, Basically, any skill or need that's identified in the evaluation should be represented by an IEP goal. There should be a service tied to that goal or time allotted to work on that goal. When we evaluate students, we come up with a list of educational needs. These are the skills that we need to teach the student so that they can perform better academically. Maybe your child with ADHD has needs related to reading comprehension. They're forgetting what they've read. Math problem solving because they're getting lost in the problem solving process. Written expression because they're having difficulty with planning and executing a lengthy written assignment. Maybe have executive function needs in completing tasks.
We would show the educational needs, and then there has to be concrete strategies for addressing each one of those educational needs.
Absolutely be a goal that's written in the IEP to address that skill.
With a
Also,
timeline, how should the goals be expressed? Because I've heard they should be like what they call SMART goals, concrete, time related, very specific, so it's not an amorphous thing. Is that what you're suggesting?
yes, goals should be measurable 100%. And that's another part of the IEP goal that you should pay attention to is how they're measuring progress and if the goal is appropriately challenging for your student. There are progress reports that come out 3 times a year for IEP goals where the school reports on how your child is progressing toward all of the goals in their IEP. So let's say your child has 5 goals, and for each of those 5 goals, there's an objective. So at those progress report times, that's a time for you to look and see, are they meeting those what they call short-term objectives? And also make sure that your child is receiving all of their services because sometimes that doesn't happen in schools.
Right, so the thing I want, with the IEP meeting happening, is this get discussed, or is it after the meeting, the parents get a written report, and then the parents will look at the report and say, this doesn't sound quite right, and then they ask for another meeting?
Absolutely. So usually if your child is receiving an IEP for the first time, they have been evaluated by the school psychologist, which is a 60-day timeline. And then an IEP will be presented to the family. The best practice is for that family to at least have a few days or up to a week before the IEP meeting to review that IEP draft so that they can compare that evaluation to make sure all those educational needs are covered. And then they can go into that meeting with more confidence and to be ready to talk about these proposed goals and services. And then if everybody agrees on the IEP, the parents will sign, and then you'll get progress 3 times a year, and you will meet once per annual cycle on your child's IEP. So let's say your child became eligible for special education and got their initial or first IEP on March 15th of 2025. So the team would need to hold another IEP meeting before March 15th, 2026. And at a minimum, IEP teams meet once per annual cycle or once per 12 months. And as a parent, you have the right to request an IEP meeting at any time. You can also request for your child to be retested once a year as well. At a minimum, the school will retest and reevaluate your child every 3 years to determine if they're still eligible for special education services. But as a parent, you actually can request for updated testing once a year.
So one thing I want to throw in here, because it's what I learned too, if you have IEP, it is that you have special education. The two terms are synonymous. And if you have a 504, you're not having special education, you're just having accommodations.
That's right. And accommodations are a part of every IEP. So essentially, if you had a 504 plan with accommodations and then you get an IEP, your accommodations could stay the same or maybe they're tweaked. It is absorbed it and bolstered it by adding goals and services in addition to those accommodations.
There's a lot of accommodations we hear about that are common for children with ADHD, sitting in the front of the classroom, chunking down, writing the directions on the board, those kind of things. Have you ever seen something new or different that you'd like to tell parents about? Is there anything, maybe with IT or with headsets or something that's not such a common recommendation?
The best accommodation for any child with ADHD at first, or at the very baseline, is a highly skilled and knowledgeable teacher. Another step is many schools have what's called co-taught or collaborative classrooms where that have a general education teacher and a special education teacher who work together, and they might pre-organize instructional content or naturally provide more small group or individualized support. They often will check in more often. How are you doing? Assist with planning assignments. So, having again a highly skilled teacher and structuring that classroom environment can be very helpful. Teachers also expecting kids to organize their assignments. So, building in time to plan out when I'm going to get my writing assignment done during my language arts class, building that into the curriculum and helping model and setting intermittent deadlines for different pieces of larger projects. All of that structure can be done for all students in the classroom. Taking the step back and what can we do to better support kids with ADHD? Other accommodations that have been helpful are some sensory strategies like alternative seating or the use of fidgets. Some kids can chew gum to keep their brain stimulated. Some kids might need movement breaks or go noodle, just stopping everybody, get up, let's stretch, or let's do some yoga. Those are some more non-conventional strategies. The use of graphic organizers can be really helpful. Organize the information that's given to students so that their brain doesn't have to do that. You all have already done it for them.
Or you're teaching them the skill to do it
Mhm.
themselves. The other thing I've heard when you talk about the importance of the teacher is the connection, letting the child bring their passions into the schoolroom.
Mhm. Absolutely. Allowing a student to complete an assignment on a topic of interest. For example, writing. That's such a struggle for kids with ADHD. Let them write about something they're interested in. And you may or may not know that when you allow a child to engage their interests, you're actually opening up the dopamine channels in their brain, and their brain gets flooded with dopamine, which is often the missing chemical, especially in the ADHD inattentive brain. And once those juices are flowing, your child with ADHD can just zoom for hours, just like they can hyper focus on a video game for 3 hours, finding ways to, yes, integrate their interests and also to find a purpose. Like, what's the point of me doing this? Things to real life and giving the work purpose and not just busy work. And on the note of busy work, being flexible to one, either allow homework to be done in class or reduce homework altogether. If a kid can show you mastery in five
Right.
items, don't make them do all 10 or 20. There's no point to that. And then the kid's going to start hating school. And that's the most important thing that we want for at least our daughter and both of our children. Despite the struggle, as long as she keeps loving school, then we've done the right thing. And that's another indicator as a mom when I start hearing, I don't want to go to school, school's terrible, I hate it, that's when we come back together and say it's probably time to make some adjustments because obviously something's not working.
Because what I've heard is when adults who got diagnosed late tell me is that they love to learn. You want them to love school because that's where they can learn.
Yes, and it becomes this duality where we're asking our ADHD kiddos to conform to our rigid school structures rather than the alternative viewpoint, which is to let's make some tweaks to bend around the needs of our students to welcome them into this space. Let's meet in the middle. Let's teach them skills and give them heavy accommodations to make learning easier.
Are you seeing
Mhm.
that happening anywhere where children are trying to be accommodated in the classroom?
Yeah, so I've seen it varies by state and what the law and philosophy is on inclusive models of special education. Some states are moving to a fully inclusive model where we are educating all of our students in the general education classroom. The drawback to you still have kids with more severe needs who really should be getting services elsewhere. The best model is that co-taught or collaborative model where you have kids in general education classrooms exposed to the general education curriculum with built-in embedded supports of special education personnel, a general education teacher skilled in differentiated instruction who has a mindset and is willing to bend around students, plus a special education teacher in that classroom.
I was wondering if you see much difference between boys and girls with ADHD and what they need for to perform well in the classroom. Does it vary or is it the same?
Boys tend to be caught and identified earlier because their symptoms tend to be more overt. They might be blurting out or running around the classroom or putting their hands on other students or leaning backwards and upside down in their chair. With girls, they tend to be quiet and stay to themselves and not cause problems. They can often be missed or misconstrued as shy or anxious. The inattentive form of ADHD looks a lot like anxiety. It's assumed a lot of times girls with inattentive ADHD might be anxious when that's not the case. It just looks similar.
Do you have any advice for how parents can form a good relationship with the school?
The number one thing to remember is that it's a really difficult climate for schools in general right now, especially post COVID. Many schools during COVID received additional funding to have additional supports like aides or reading specialists. Now, all of those funds have dried up, so those positions have gone. Teachers are extremely exhausted post COVID. The kids are needier academically, they're needier behaviorally. Our teachers haven't had a break, nor have they had a lot of training in differentiated instruction, in behavioral techniques or mental health strategies to support students. My first suggestion to families is to just take a moment, give your child's teachers and team the benefit of the doubt. They are working hard, they're working more hours than they should. They're not always getting support and professional development and resources. Give the school a chance to do what's best for your kid. When you feel it's not enough or it's not right, that's your time to step in. You should be advocating for your child. If they're saying your child's reading is average and there's no way they are not even reading their homework, speak up. But give that school team the benefit of the doubt and the opportunity to do right by your child. If or when it starts to teeter off course, definitely push harder, seek support. There are people like myself and educational advocates who work with families behind the scenes to review records to make sure that everything looks good. We can give you ideas for other supports in the community, other interventions in the school system that you can access, even outside of a child's IEP, like reading intervention, executive functioning intervention, social skills groups.
I guess you've encountered this with your own child at home, but what about the homework battles? How do parents avoid getting into it and yet feel like they're keeping their child on track for their education?
Accept that it's going to be an imperfect process and it's going to be inconsistent. Some days your child might do all of their homework because it was interesting or they felt good or they did it before the meds wore off. Other days it's going to be a struggle. With our child's teacher is we have an agreement of the amount of time our child was going to spend on homework each night. And then we communicated to the teacher what we got done, what we didn't get done. And we left it work with your child's teacher to come up with an amount of time teaching time management and goal setting. We work with our child on, okay, what are you going to do first? Are you going to work from easiest, shortest assignment to hardest assignment? Are you going to go with the hardest one first? How is your brain feeling right now? We make a schedule. We estimate the amount of time it might take. And then we gave her a visual timer. A visual timer is like a kitchen timer. When you turn it, you can see a shaded portion that's pretty large. And as the time goes by, it gets smaller and smaller. That's a great way to teach your child self-monitoring skills and time management skills. If I have 45 minutes to do 15 problems, by 30 minutes, I need to be at problem number 6. By 15 minutes left.
What I've heard some people say is that in elementary school, you don't need to be as worried about the grades as much as getting certain things in place.
Absolutely. Getting the 504 plan in place, getting the IEP in place. And for us as parents, we really prioritize teaching our daughter study skills. She had these strategies of when am I going to do which activity, how long is it going to take, and teaching her how to approach this giant stack of work. And then when our younger daughter got to 6th grade, she just floundered because she'd never had to bring on any of those study skills.
And what I've heard too is to praise the effort, not always the result.
So that work comes from Carol Dweck's growth mindset literature, where she talks about keeping a growth mindset, not being fixed, being open to new challenges, being open to new ideas. I'm just not there yet.
Even a famous psychologist talks about adults with ADD having resilience. And I was saying, I don't know how people get that, but that's a very important characteristic to have because there will be challenges. And if you can teach them to not give up when there's a challenge, but to learn how to conquer it, that is an essential skill for going forward.
A big part of being able to cultivate a mindset like that is helping your child know what it is, tell them they have ADHD, explain to them what it is and how it impacts them and how it gives them superpowers often of creativity and spontaneity and energy. Things can be a little more challenging for them, helping them move toward accepting their ADHD, that their brain is wired differently. And that's great. That's going to make them amazing at a job one day, something they're very interested in, so that they can be open to accepting, okay, for today, I'm really struggling with my attention and I feel like I gave it my best effort. I will try again tomorrow and just let it be.
We've covered a lot of material and thank you for all your information. Is there anything, if you had one thing to tell parents who are dealing with a child with ADHD, what's your nugget of advice?
My nugget advice would be just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. They are going to continue to require you to repeat directions 4 times. They're going to continue to forget their things, to lose things, and just making sure that you're taking care of yourself to handle their mishaps with grace and to keep their confidence and morale up would be my number one suggestion. Accepting as a parent that this is not a changeable thing, fulfilling our own cup so that we can be present to parent our child with grace rather than with frustration and anger.
Thank you, Ashley.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.